Welcome to another episode of the Marketing Schematic. Today we have a very exciting episode planned. If the idea of building a new website has been rolling around in your brain for a while, this is definitely the episode for you. So today we are going to discuss everything you need to think about before you even get started in the website development process, from understanding your why you want to build a new website, to organizing internal and external teams. And we'll also talk a little bit about just some of the trends we're seeing in manufacturing and industrial websites specifically. So this time around, Chad, I'm going to be treating you kind of as a subject matter expert in this because you've launched many websites in your time here at Top Floor, from what I hear.
From what you hear, yeah. I don't know about expert, but yeah, no, I've been around long enough to be able to answer some of these questions.
Yes. If you had to guess or give it a range, how many website projects do you think you've been involved in?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would say on average, we probably launch around 10 to 15 a year, let's say 10 years, probably somewhere around 100.
That's exciting. We should have been
Yeah.
keeping tabs on this.
Crazy.
We could have done like an announcement for you.
I bet we could go back and figure it out, but that
Yeah.
as rewarding as that would be, there'd also be a little bit painful going back on all of those projects, I feel. Especially when I was first starting out. I think I don't know if I want to look back at those emails.
All the blood, sweat, and tears.
Nothing worse than looking at an email that you sent when you first started at a company, right?
Yeah. That's true. Come along.
But yeah, it's been a lot. I know enough to be dangerous. Let's say that.
Yep. We also have Justin back on the podcast. So we'll have multiple perspectives today on both the project development side and then a little on the marketing side too. So welcome back, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So while I'm excited to dive into this topic, you know how I like to begin our podcast episodes. So I do have an icebreaker on the travel theme still. It's very simple, but what's one travel plan you have planned for 2024 that you're excited about? And we can start with you, Chad.
Ooh, well, we, as my wife and family told me this morning, because the kids do a countdown every day, are 35 days out from our Disney cruise. So that is the that's the one that's upcoming, the closest one. And everyone is jacked. We get to go to Disney World and do all the fun stuff. And it'll be my first time on a cruise and our first time on a Disney cruise. So looking forward to it.
Exciting.
Yeah, it should be fun.
I've never done a cruise before, so I'm eager to hear how it is.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. If I can, going off of when I ask people if they like it or not, so we'll find out. Pretty split, 50-50, but
I know. I think the part that freaks me out a little bit is like not being able to leave when you want to, but I'm assuming you'll get stops along the way where you can get off the boat.
Yes, there are stops, and I'm told it is such a big ship that you don't even realize that you're stuck out in the middle of the ocean with nowhere to go. I feel like, and we have the same level of anxiety because I'm like, whoa, I am in the middle of the ocean and I can't get off this boat.
Yes, but the travel anxiety is real.
Yeah, no, it'll be all good.
Yeah. What about you, Justin?
So my kids and my sister's kids, for the first time literally ever, have the same week off for spring break. So we're heading out to Florida together at the end of the month, actually. So we're looking forward to that.
Nice. Are we all traveling in March? No, Chad's yours is in May, isn't it?
In April. So
April. Okay.
Beginning of April. Yep.
Nice. I will also be traveling this month to Cancun. Very excited. But as we talked about last week, it dawned on me that it's going to be spring breakers season. So I'm a little nervous about that. I hope I can relax, but I'm sure it'll be fun.
Yeah. Too funny.
All right. Well, let's dive into website stuff. So I want to start with kind of understanding the why someone comes to us looking for help with a new website project, and what are, I guess, some of the biggest reasons that you see, Chad, for clients coming to us looking to develop a website project?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's no shortage of reasons as to why people come to us, but I think some of the big ones are their current site is outdated, right? Things change just like in any industry. I always kind of use the building a home type analogy when I'm talking about websites. And you think about like home design or trends in that, like it changes every couple of years. So a lot of our clients are coming to us with outdated websites. They just know they need a better look and feel. They need a better representation of their company to the, outward kind of public. Then there's the more specific reasons, maybe they're having trouble with lead generation. That's a big one. Maybe it's kind of further up the funnel, and maybe they're having trouble with organic traffic or issues there. Maybe there's new industries or markets they're trying to go after. A hot button topic in the last 6 months for us is people looking to add e-commerce, whether they sell like parts or accessories or consumables. That's a big one. And then just overall, I think maybe there's like enhancements to just internal processes. So if they can build a new website that maybe eliminates the need for a lot of like manual data entry or, those types of things, they want to integrate with different systems. That's another big reason that people might come to us to build a new site. Kind of like, I guess, why do you buy a new car? For instance, because maybe yours is outdated, it's run down, it's costing you money instead of making you money. Well, I guess your car doesn't really make you money unless you're an Uber driver, maybe.
That's true.
But yeah, maybe it's costing you money and it's not really getting the results you want, and it's just kind of time to think about building a new one.
Yeah, I like the analogy too of the home building or like home renovating. Like, maybe after 10 years or so, you're like, I need a new kitchen. Like, I just need an update. I think one of the other reasons that I see is clients coming to us kind of doing this alongside of like a rebrand or like kind of reintroducing themselves. So I think that's another very common reason is to kind of have that website happening alongside that so that as they're doing their rebrand, they have their website to align with that and mirror that.
That's absolutely. Rebrand for sure. I think also like mergers, acquisitions, that sort of stuff too. We see projects come from that where, maybe there's a parent or a holding company that purchases a company and they want to roll them into their brand. That happens a lot too. So,
do you ever find that like there isn't enough thought given beforehand into why a new website is needed?
All right. This is on the record, right?
Okay. Yes. Well, I can cut out anything you don't want.
All right, good. I would say it's far and few between where a prospect comes to us and they kind of have a good handle on what they're looking for or what they need, which isn't wrong, right? A lot of times maybe it's not their primary job function to worry about website stuff. But it's pretty rare, and it's refreshing when those clients do come along because that's going to be a good one to work with and a good project to work on when they kind of have their ducks in a row and they really know what they want or what they need. But more often than not, I would say 70% of the time, having these discussions, which I have, multiple every week, it's tell me what I need, tell me what I want, tell me how much it costs without any kind of like homework being done whatsoever. Which is totally fine, I guess, but. And then to go back to like the home buying kind of analogy again, like it's just sometimes it floors me that is the case because we're talking about, such a wide range of a product when you talk about a website. So anywhere from, you can build something on a Wix by yourself for a couple $100 to upwards of having ERP integrated e-commerce websites that cost well over $1 million. And to just come to the agency and say, you tell me what I need or tell me what I want. Like there's just such a big range. You wouldn't do that if I was going to buy a house, for instance. I'm not going to go to the builder and say, well, tell me what I need, what I want. Well, how many bedrooms do you want? Like what kind of kitchen do you want? Do you want exposure in your basement? How big of a lot? There's just a lot of things that I think you should be figuring out before you get to that point of engaging with an agency to get a quote or an estimate or certainly start a project.
Then when a client doesn't really know what it is they want, like what questions do you then kind of put back on them to say like, okay, go talk about these things internally. Like what should they start thinking about before they come to a vendor for a new website?
Yeah, good question. I think first, like looking at your current website, because most of the times there is a current website that's out there. Now, if it's a new company or a new product or something along those lines, maybe that's not the case, but most of the time there is. What is working well? Do some analysis on your current site. What's working well and what's not working. What are you hearing from customers or clients, or what's broken? What do you wish had a different kind of functionality? What are those pain points that customers are experiencing? I'd start there, and then I would start to think about, okay, to use that house analogy again, looking at the current structure of my website, like, does it meet the goals of our company right now? Or do I need to look at adding new sections? Are there new markets that I want to go after? Do we have new product lines coming out that are underrepresented on the website? Pretty easy to just sit down with a pen and paper and start to think about, okay, what is the high level structure of my website? Not necessarily writing down every page that's going to be on that website, because that's something that'll come out in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But the rooms in the house, you should know how many rooms you want and what types of rooms you want in your house.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think too, it might be beneficial to discuss with some of the internal teams and to ask them, what do they think their website needs? What could make their job easier? Because I think too, some of the things and requests that we get will be like, hey, we really want our clients to be able to access their technical documents, manuals or part lists, or that type of stuff that maybe customer service deals with on a day in and day out basis, but maybe sales doesn't. Talk to them about what are the common questions that they're getting that they wish the website could just either answer for them, or that they could at least link to. Something that just again makes their job easier. It makes the customer happy too, because they have a quick, easy reference, something that they can access without having to wait for a call back or an email to be responded to. And then I think too is taking the time to really just define success. It's easy to just say, I want more sales, or I want to generate more leads coming from the website, but really take the time. Well, what does that mean? What are you getting currently, and what would a success look like to you? Is that a 20% increase? Is it a 15%? What is that number? Because then I think that'll help you too in the long term when you're talking with a partner about your marketing strategy. They can then have that end goal in mind and not just get more, because one more lead is technically more, but if that doesn't feel good to you, then you need to tell them, hey, I'm looking to get 10 more leads a month. All right, I can work with that. Here's what we need to do in order to achieve that.
Right. Like kind of thinking of your website as it's part of one piece of a big picture, where if you have all these other goals, there's going to be other channels that you'll want to use and things like that. And then you kind of touched on something too, Justin, of audience too. Like I think identifying who your website is for ahead of time as well, because obviously there's a lot of clients that come to us that's definitely like they're looking for new business, but sometimes they just want a better experience for their current customer base. So I think identifying too, like who's going to be using your website, and also even asking your current customers, like what are their challenges and pain points with the website right now. I think that can be really good feedback too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And the use of things like buyer personas and the thought process behind a user's journey through your website. If it's a current customer accessing your website, what are they trying to accomplish? How can we make that easy? If it's a new prospect, what kind of information are they looking for? How can we make it very clear that this is how you navigate through our website to find that? Those are the kind of thoughts that you should start to have when it comes to what should my website do and how should it function. And an agency can help you with through that process, because it's kind of daunting when you really actually do sit down and think about it.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that's something that we've kind of started incorporating in our process too, is that like user journey mapping once we're actually in it and planning a website and developing it, talking through different buyer personas and kind of what path each one should take once they arrive. So it's good to like know at least a sense of who you think is going to be on your website, coming into that project.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
Do you think at this stage of just in kind of the planning process, do you need to think about like the technology that you're using? Like, is that something to consider too, Chad, ahead of time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the biggest things when you think about like the end goal, right, is to get a estimate from the agency and kind of a project plan, or at least a loose idea as to like what the end goal is, what those requirements are for the project. And technology is something that's going to definitely affect the budget. What kind of integrations are there going to need to be? What is this website speaking to, or where is it grabbing information from? If you are using some sort of an ERP and you want that integrated via API, all that sort of stuff. That's a big one. I think even bigger than, a lot of times people, or even other agencies I've seen ask like how many pages are going to be on the new website. I don't really find that as a really good tool to understand the overall cost of a website, because you can build 100 very simple, easy pages,
Right.
in however many hours a page or something along those lines. But when it comes to the types of pages, the complexity of those pages, and then some of the back end functionality things, that's really in the end going to determine, the overall cost and overall time and effort it takes to build that site.
Yeah. So start thinking about like types of functionality basically you might want to have on that website.
Absolutely. I would go to each department in your company, each department head, or even company wide, if you want to be real aggressive with it, and just say, what do you wish our new website did? Start there. That could be the very simplest thing to start with. Go to your customer service people. What do you wish our website did? Ask your sales reps. What do you wish our website did? Or what function do you want to have on a new website if we went through that process? And then you start to gather from them internally the types of things you think you need. And then the next step from there is get some, outside information from customers, clients, or just users of your site, whether that's using like aggregate data or actually asking them, what do you wish our website, what do you wish you were able to do on our new site? Gather some of that information. And then I think the third point is starting to look at what competitors are doing. Pick your top 5 competitors and just spend an hour browsing their website and see what they've got going on. What type of functionality are they doing? What types of pages and sections do they have? And try to not only, imitate some of the things that are working really well, but try to do some of the things that they're doing poorly better than they're doing, so that people want to use your website over theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Even like not necessarily competitors, just websites that you're like, oh, I really like how they're treating XYZ, even if they're not even the same industry as you, like just starting to kind of pull examples or things that are sort of on your wish list. And here's an example of someone that's doing this really well. Can we incorporate that? I think that's good research to do ahead of time too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And with us being primarily building websites for, OEMs and manufacturing type companies and B2B industrial companies, a lot of times the competitor websites, there may be one competitor that's kind of doing an okay job, but I can't tell you how many times we sit in a meeting and, our client or our prospect is like, well, I don't want anything to do with our competitors' websites because they're terrible.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, at least take a look at that and note it. And then, you're kind of, you're at a big advantage then if you do build out a really easy to use, well functioning website.
Yeah, definitely. I want to move towards talking about kind of gathering your team. So we've seen, I guess, a wide range of clients who I think are handling everything all on their own in terms of working directly with the vendor, trying to see a website launch, and then clients who've got like everyone at the company has a say or is involved.
Yeah.
So what is your recommendation, I guess, for figuring out which internal team members at your company need to be involved in the website design process?
Yeah. First and foremost, take your most organized person and put them at the point. That's what I would have. That person, that marketing person, usually on the client side, our best projects are when that person is organized, and they're ultimately the project manager for the client side. There's going to be a project manager on the agency side, but you need that person on the client side to organize all those other moving parts as far as team members that are going to be in those review meetings, all that sort of stuff. So that's first. From there, it's really, it really depends on the project, but I would say you definitely want to have, you want everyone on notice. I mean, it's a big, exciting thing, right? You're building a new website. It's going to affect the whole company. It usually, like when we started out, you were saying it kind of sometimes correlates with like a brand refresh or some milestone, something very exciting happening in the company. So you want everyone to be on notice that this project is happening, but like the day-to-day involvement, limit your team to no more than 6 for sure, but maybe, 3, 4 core people that are going to be involved in those everyday meetings or the everyday project. It's kind of, it can quickly become a too many cooks in the kitchen type thing when you're trying to, certainly when you're trying to do design and content. Everyone has a difference of opinion on that sort of stuff. So,
yeah, but definitely that one person that, whether they're the final say or they're just the one who's in charge of gathering internally what that final say is. Because otherwise, if you sit in a meeting and everybody's got to come to an agreement before you hang up, it's going to take 4 hours and you're really not going to come to a consensus, and no one's going to be happy because you had to compromise. Like, take those conversations back to your internal teams, talk about what they like, talk about what they feel like they need to change, and then kind of distill that down to, okay, what's the feedback that we need maybe on this homepage design or on the functionality of this website. But yeah, I think having one person in particular who is kind of responsible for giving that final say back to the external partner, like an agency, is key.
Yeah, Justin's absolutely right. You got to know who the final answer is from, because everyone, like I said, is going to have an opinion. And if everyone is constantly kind of coming up with what they think something should be, it's never going to actually happen. You're never going to get a final answer.
Yeah, I'm not obviously involved in very many website projects these days, but one thing that would make sense to me is just whoever is involved, beyond just like that point person who kind of is like mediator between everyone and project managing everything, making sure that the people who are then involved outside of that, like, have a very clear function or role of why they're involved. Like, they don't need to have a say in everything, but maybe they could be pulled in at certain parts of the project. Like, I don't know, a salesperson might want to have something to say about specific product pages. I don't know. Something like that, where it's like, okay, it makes sense for them to come in here and kind of give their opinion, but they don't need to be a part of like the whole thing. So
right. Yeah, and from the agency side, like, we need to know who that, who has like the final say on things, because you're going to get, especially when it comes to the design, like I said, in the content side of things, like, you're going to get 4 different people with a different opinion that all contradict with each other, and it becomes really hard. And we almost then have to play like mediator and determine who gets to say, who gets the right answer.
Yeah.
Which is usually going to be someone that either owns or is the president or, of the company.
Yeah, and I get too that they'll want to be involved in the project too. But what I've actually seen too, and again, I'm not as involved in the web projects as I was back in the day, but you kind of get that fear of feedback from the rest of the team when someone like the owner is sitting in a call. Nobody wants to give their 2 cents because they're afraid that it might be contradictory to what the kind of big boss is thinking. So you kind of got to be able to understand the internal politics of your company and say, okay, is this a meeting that that president, that owner, that CEO, whatever, is it, should they be in this meeting, or should we gather the feedback, present them to in a separate meeting, and get their say?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I think you're right, Justin. That's a lot of projects that I've seen that are successful. What that marketing person does, or that point person does, is they're usually having an internal meeting after like the agency meeting, where they just kind of set them up to happen right after those. And that's where they're presenting to that higher level of people, or the other people outside of the main core people involved in the day-to-day, having that meeting, get approval from them, then come back to the agency and say, okay, here, we got approval. This is what we want to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of internal conversation that'll need to happen kind of separate from the vendor that you choose to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that note, we are just assuming that you're going to go work with the vendor and agency, but what are some of the other options out there? Obviously, we are biased towards agency.
Yeah, there's other options. What are you talking about?
There are other options, but do you want to just talk through kind of like the pros and cons of, like, maybe we'll stick to like going with like a freelancer or your own internal IT person versus working with an agency?
Yeah. Again, I'll stick with the same theme because we're right in the middle of a basement remodel project, and a similar discussion about that project just came up over the weekend. So I was talking to a couple of my neighbors at a birthday party over the weekend, and it's like, yeah, the basement's been framed and insulated, and then we've got someone coming to do the roughing for plumbing and stuff. And like, well, you could have done the framing. It's not that hard. I'm like, yeah, but okay. I am not a professional, right? So it's going to take me, let's say, 3 times as long and probably not going to be as good. And B, I don't have the time or the tools or the internal resources to do it. So can do something and like want to do something. Like, you have to think about that trade-off for your internal teams. Because I think if you have a developer on staff or someone who has the capability and the knowledge to build a website, they're probably on staff doing something else, not, just there every 5 to 7 years when you build a new website. They must have other full-time job functions that if you put this project on them, it's a big project. So now ultimately that's their focus, and all those other things are kind of falling by the wayside. So that's number one in my opinion.
And not to mention, if they're focused on those other things for those 5 to 7 years, they're not staying up to date on latest web trends. They're not learning those skills. Right. So yeah, they might have built a website back in 2015, but are they going to be able to do that now with the same level of efficiency?
That's a really, really good point. And now talking about that one person, they've got to be on top of all of the different functions that go into a website. I mean, a typical project for us, there's 5 to 8 team members on that project that are all approaching that project from a different area of expertise. So someone who is, their job is to stay on top of what Google is doing with organic search rankings. That's their job. Day in and day out, that's what they're doing. They're on that project making decisions based on best practices for search engines. Then there's a developer. Then there's a designer who's on top of everything that has to do with the latest and greatest in design and usability and user experience. Project manager who's only there for keeping things coordinated and on time and on budget. You're asking that one person then to be all of those things. With just going to Justin's point, you can't be an expert in all of those things at the same time. It's just impossible.
And collaborating on those projects, like, yes, the developer's main focus is development, but they've sat in enough meetings with designers, with SEOs, that they know, okay, I know that the SEO team is going to ask me for this, so I want to make sure that I incorporate that, or at least ask that question about that functionality, where even if you do have somebody internally, maybe their sole focus is the website. They develop it, they maintain it, they update it. If they're not getting that exposure to other areas of expertise, they're just not going to think about it, and they're just going to make sure that they do kind of what's been asked of them, as opposed to grow and do other things. And that's not necessarily a dig on them, but that's their focus. That's their job. That's what they get paid for. Whereas with an agency, it's not just that you get that exposure to expertise, it's that team does as well. So they're kind of thinking they know how to work together. They know what's going to throw up a red flag for another team member, or what they're going to appreciate that they took the time and effort to think about.
Yeah. Even our best and brightest in their area of expertise have their minds changed or learn new things from someone else that's on a project. I mean, it happens on every single project where we may design something that's really cool, but then the SEO specialist comes in and says, like, hey guys, there's a better way to do this if we really want to be able to capture organic traffic, or developer says there's a better way to build this than the way that you laid it out, because it'll be really easy to use if we do it this way.
Each person kind of comes with their own perspective and expertise, that you're not just relying on that one person or that one IT guy to make all of those decisions when they lack expertise in design or whatever other area. So it makes sense.
And just to make sure that we don't just sound like we're homers here. So there are some advantages to having an internal team member that does it. Obviously, you then control that resource. Like you know how many hours they're going to be working on that project. You have them internally, whereas when you work with an agency, they're likely working on multiple projects. While there's still probably an established timeline and deadlines associated with the project, you ultimately don't have control over those resources. So there's things like that. Also, they have direct access to the team because they work together. So if they need a question from the marketing person or engineer or sales, they can probably walk over or send an email and get a pretty quick response. So, there are definitely advantages of working with an internal team. But again, I still think that if you understand your why, maybe I don't just need a good functioning website. I need to be able to capture organic traffic. I need to increase leads. I need to have this, updated look and feel. Maybe your internal resource, that's just not the right choice. They can still be involved in the project. Maybe they're even the point person, but you need to kind of look outside of that in order to get that expertise and to satisfy those whys.
Right. Absolutely. And it's probably going to be a little bit cheaper, to be honest, like the cost effective way talking about, especially when you talk about like freelance opportunities, because you're not having all of those people in a meeting or all of those people working on the same thing at a time.
Right.
So, but again, that's a trade-off, right?
Yeah. I think it's almost like you, as the marketing person, need to evaluate like how much time you have to dedicate towards this project. If you have ample time, I think that's one thing. And maybe it's feasible to do this all internally. Also, another thing to consider too is what experience you have as that marketing manager. Maybe you have design experience or SEO experience, and that's your forte. So you can bring that expertise and work with that IT person. But if you feel like I don't know any of those things and it'd take a lot of time for me to learn those things, it might make the most sense and be most efficient to go with an outside vendor agency.
Right. And it like any industry, there's little things that you can't just sit down and know. Like a good analogy again is, sticking with the home stuff for this basement project I was talking about before, looking at doing some of the things by myself. I don't have 30 years experience doing electrical work. There's little things that come up that you can't just sit down and read about, or you can't watch a YouTube video and get all the ins and outs of it. It's experience. It's just pure experience from being a part of that 10 to 15 projects a year and seeing, frankly, where things go wrong and how to avoid those different things.
And I think that should go into your process of identifying a partner, is asking those questions. Those challenges that you're coming across, the things that you want your website to do. Make sure that you're asking those questions. Do you have experience adding e-commerce to a website? Do you have experience, with our industry? Do you have experience, with the target market that we're looking for? Because those are all going to be key questions to ask. Yeah, I mean, trust me, there's no end of people out there that can build you a website, but the ability to do it for you, to meet your needs, to have the expertise that you're looking for, it's really key to do your due diligence and not just pick the first person you find or the lowest price quote, because that can end up costing you even more in the end, because you're going to end up with an end product that you're going to need to update again in a year because it's still not meeting your needs.
100%.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask next is, if you are considering an agency partner, what kinds of questions do you need to ask them in order to kind of vet them? I'll ask you, Chad.
Yeah, I think where Justin was going was a really good start for sure. I think asking, how many projects did you launch last year, or how many projects are you planning on launching this year, is a really good feel for, okay, how many website projects is this company really doing? What is your what industries are you mostly working in? I think that's kind of, I think industries is important. I think getting too granular with that question and just saying like, do you work with any other banks, for instance, or something along those lines? Like that not necessarily is a good indicator of exactly the type of agency I want. But if you're in that industry and you're working with similar companies, I think that makes sense. I think asking about the process in general, like, what is your process? I think you can tell a lot from that estimation process when you're vetting companies. If someone gets back to you the next day without any questions and says, this is how much it's going to be, I mean, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it should be a red flag right there. Like there's a lot of uncovering and discovery that needs to go into even the simplest of websites to be able to accurately quote it. And anyone could just throw a number out there, because a lot of times in the agency world, it's not really a time and material type estimate anyways. So I think a lot of people quote things and just say, well, we'll make it up and we'll just have to go for overages or whatever. So looking at the amount of time that goes into the estimation process is a big one for me. And I think that's something that you could really differentiate different agencies that are competing bids.
Yeah. Yeah. Like how much time and care they're putting into actually understanding your goals of the website, what kind of special functionality you might have, all that kind of stuff. Justin, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add 2 cents. I mean, it's, yes, you're vetting in a partner, and that's why I want to stress that word. So I think you might even want to ask them, like, what concerns do you have, knowing what you know about our project, what are some things that are maybe causing you a little bit of a worry, or you have some questions about, because they might not be comfortable asking that, especially in the sales process, because they want to make sure that they give a good impression. But if they, like Chad said, there's 15 people involved in this project, that's a red flag for me. Like, I'm a little concerned that there might be too many people who have their input in this. My recommendation would be X, Y, and Z. Establishing communication, like this is what we expect, from a communication standpoint. Like, if I'm expecting a weekly meeting, you got to make sure that you're talking about that up front, because if what the agency is expecting, from their process is not that, then there's going to be some immediate friction there. So I think making sure that you're thinking about how you are going to work with that agency as well, and making sure that you're asking questions kind of along those lines can help weed out some people that might not be a good fit, and might even be able to further establish your good feelings if you have a partner that you really want to work with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to also discuss a little bit about kind of tools and technology. We touched on that a little bit, but specifically content management systems, that's a big thing to kind of consider, and is also, I think, goes hand in hand with this question of vetting an agency or a partner in this project. What should be considered when you're choosing a content? Actually, what is a content management system for those who are really new? We'll start there.
Is that your SEO background coming out? You got to start with what is a CMS?
Yeah.
What is a CMS?
So very simply, a content management system is just kind of the liaison, if you will, between the marketing and the development, HTML behind the scenes kind of thing, how the website looks. So the content management system is where you're entering, you're creating pages, you're entering content, your kind of admin area of that website. There's any number of them out there, hundreds upon hundreds, I'm sure, of different content management systems that are available. We have preference, but to be honest, there's a lot of benefits to different ones. It really just depends on preference and, again, needs in what you're looking for. We usually gravitate towards open source platforms, so platforms that have a community behind them that are maintaining them, versus more kind of software as a service models, where it's just one company that kind of owns that software and they're responsible for maintaining it. Because I like the idea of having a large community of people keep making sure things are secure and enhancing functionality. And I like the idea of when we build a website for a project, that website belongs to that person, to that company, I should say, where, if you are on kind of more of the software as a service model, you're beholden to that platform that you're on. And if things go wrong or things go sour, I've had this come up a number of times. Well, how do I get off of it? Well, you build a new website on a different platform. I mean, there's no way around it. You're not going to easily be able to hit the export button and just kind of move on.
Right. You're kind of locked into that agency then forever until you build a new website with a new CMS.
Yeah, you're renting, right? That's going back to the housing thing. You're definitely renting. You don't own that house. You're paying a monthly fee. All that.
And there's only specific contractors that can work on it, and you have to use those.
Right. Exactly.
As opposed to something like WordPress, where there's so many options out there. So that if you want an internal resource, there's likely a developer you can hire that's got experience with that platform, as opposed to maybe even just a licensed CMS, where again, it's going to be very specific, very much a smaller community of developers and designers and people that have experience working with it. I think that's, again, we're partial to open source, but I think that really does not only give you that ownership, but also that kind of peace of mind that if something doesn't work out with a partner, and that's not what we want to plan for, and that's not we want to set ourselves up for failure, but it happens. It's out there, and you have that freedom to now I can find another partner relatively easily that can also still help me with this website, and I'm not going to be forced to leave it in order to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to kind of do what Justin did earlier, and the flip side of that is there's a lot of content management systems out there that are kind of that more software as a service type model, and they're highly specialized in what they do in certain cases. And if that meets your needs, it can be a really good choice. A lot of times it can be a lot quicker to launch, from start to finish. If you use, let's say you want to build an e-commerce website, you don't have a lot of crazy like integrations or custom functionality needed. Usually isn't the case for our manufacturing clients, but if I want to pop up a little store to sell, very basic, but sell t-shirts or something, I can throw that on Shopify in a day and kind of plug and play and be on my way and all set up and ready to go. And so there's use cases for those platforms, and some of them can be really powerful. Some of them can be really expensive too, but they can be really powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point. It kind of goes back to what you were saying, where like if you're, really niche industry and you find a developer that they have their own content management system, but they are the experts in building websites for something extremely niche that has very specific functionality or things like that, then it could be a good choice in that case.
Yeah, I would just make sure like kind of the red flag for me there is if it's a custom CMS, what we would call it, a custom content management system, and it's kind of an agency's custom content management system.
Right.
So you're talking about an agency of like 100 people or less, and they're the ones that are responsible for maintaining. That's a red flag for me, because that's not enough. It's not enough people, not enough man, woman power to be able to keep that up to date, keep it secure, all that sort of stuff. And if it is up to date and it is secure, I guarantee that not a lot of effort is going into some of the functionality and some of the enhancements and making sure that that platform is the latest and greatest.
Right.
If you're talking the bigger platforms where they're large enterprise companies, sure, then they have enough resources to be able to do that sort of stuff because they've got money flowing in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's too another consideration and a question that you should be asking the partner is how easy is it for you to make those updates yourself? Because I think that's another big advantage of content management systems in general is that I need a new page because we have a new product or a new service. I can log in, I can go into the back, and I can build that. It's already designed, it's already developed. I just have to fill out these content fields, and then I hit publish, and it's up and running. Not all content management systems are that way. Sometimes they're built in a way that you're kind of almost forced to go back to that partner and say, hey, I need to make this change, or it's not formatted right. Or so I think that's a big consideration as well, is how easy is it going to be for me to maintain this myself, add new stuff, update what's there, because that can be a major headache.
100%.
Like I just want to update that one paragraph and I can't access it. I can't get to it. How do I do that? And the answer is I got to go back to my partner and have them do it.
100%. That's a really good point, Justin. We're kicking off a project on Wednesday here, and this particular client now was a prospect not that long ago when we were going through the process. She said, we're in it. We're talking about quotes. We're up against a couple other people, and she said, you know what would really help? Can we spend a half hour and you just walk me through the back end of a site that you built so I can get a feel for it? And that never happens, and unless I suggest that to a client because they're unfamiliar. No, very rarely do I get that request. And I thought that was really cool because I was like, yeah, what a better way to get a feel for what you're buying than to have, not just a test drive.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
A walk through an open house because we got to stick with construction, right?
Yeah, an open house. I love it. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, you know what? Good for you for asking that, because now you get a feel for, a site, and have them pick a site that either launched recently or one that's in the process. Don't have them kind of show you the old demo that's been around forever. That's like tailored just to make that sale.
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised that doesn't come up more often, because I would want to see, like, if I knew I was launching a website, it was a CMS that I was unfamiliar with, I would want to see, like, what does that end user experience look like? So I think that's a really good question to ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whoever you potentially work with.
And it's not, I say this a lot in meetings too, is just because some two agencies build a website on a WordPress, for instance, doesn't make those two websites the same. And especially when you're talking about the back end functionality, a lot of time, effort, and just like experience goes into be able to build a back end of a website that makes it really easy for a non-developer or a non-technical person to be able to control all things on that website. So have them walk you through that to get a better feel for how they handle that side of it.
So while we're on the topic of CMS and technology and functionality, what kinds of functionality should someone think about whether or not they need going into a website project? Or some that you see most commonly?
Yeah, I can start. So I touched on it earlier, but a lot of projects now are at least considering e-commerce in some way. Now, maybe not going full on being able to actually, from start to finish, like take payments and order things, but trying to make that experience more e-commerce like, whether it's a quote cart or maybe some sort of like a smart form where they can enter a part number and that part number comes up into the form. That's a big thing we've seen, especially in the last 6 months. We've always done e-commerce projects, but our manufacturing and those industrial kind of B2B type clients are starting to push for that. They really want to try to find that as a channel for growth. So that's a big one. And then I would just say a very broad one is just integrations. How can we integrate with our different back-end office systems to be able to make things easier, eliminate that kind of manual labor that comes into some of the processes and procedures that have just always happened with our clients? Like, how can we make these two things talk to each other and try to eliminate some of that time lost on some of those processes?
Yeah, I was going to say specifically on the marketing side, if you have, if you've got a marketing plan, you likely have, an email platform that you're using. Maybe you even have a marketing automation platform. Maybe you have a CRM. It's kind of a little bit of sales, a little bit of customer service. Think about how can my website tie to those a little more seamlessly and make those things easy. Maybe they add people directly to mailing lists. Maybe they transmit that information directly to our CRM, so our sales team can kind of take leads and kind of run with them from there and don't have to do any manual admin work. So think of some of that functionality too.
Yeah. And then I think another big one, and this is industry wide, I don't think it's just our clients, but just the personalization kind of aspect and inside of things, and being able to customize that experience on your website to the individual, just period.
Yeah.
And trying to tailor those experiences so that if I come to the website from a certain industry or a certain company, I am not only getting that information that I'm looking for, I'm getting it tailored to me. I feel like, you're speaking directly to me. That's a big one that we're incorporating more and more into projects and spending time and effort to be able to make that experience more personalized.
Yeah. One I can think of that's maybe a little more specific that I've seen a lot is like find my dealer, a distributor locator. I feel like those come up a lot too as unique functionality in the manufacturing world, but
definitely. I think like the idea of like a knowledge center or like a repository of content is a big one lately too, that a lot of people want to incorporate, rather than having like a separate page that just lists a bunch of technical documents or a page that lists a bunch of blogs or that sort of stuff. Kind of combining those all into one section or area of the website where you can filter down by industry, by topic, by all sorts of things, and be able to see, kind of consume all of that content in one easy place. That's definitely been a big one lately.
Yeah. And I think too, to expand on e-commerce as well is it might be, you might think it's e-commerce 101 or it should be included, but things like, related products, maybe they're buying a piece of equipment. You want to make sure the right filters, hoses, parts, or whatever are being recommended by the website that they should be adding there as well. Or if you have bulk pricing, those are things that you have to consider as well. Like, is it going to be anybody who buys over a certain amount gets it, or is it only certain customers? Do they need a special login? Think about some of those things too as you analyze your sales process, and how would I handle this if someone called on the phone versus can I do this on the website as well?
Yeah. And then I think the other two that I would say not a lot of people are thinking about, but it's definitely important, would be both like ADA compliance type stuff. That's a huge issue right now, and it's really starting to hit the manufacturing industry pretty hard with lawsuits being brought against. I mean, let's face it, a lot of companies within the manufacturing industrial space, they have old websites. They're crappy websites that are definitely not built to be accessible with accessibility in mind. They weren't designed that way. So that's a big one. And then just, you probably, if you're in marketing, you probably have no shortage of emails about just cookie consent and all that sort of stuff, and making sure that you're compliant with user data. That's another big one too.
Yeah, cool. Well, I want to sort of wrap up on, now that hopefully this has inspired you, if you're listening, to start doing some of this research and asking some of these questions internally. So once you've done that, what is the next step? Where do you go from there?
You email cspotty.
Yeah, I was gonna say www.topfloortech.com. No, I think once you have your ducks in a row and you kind of, you've done some of the preliminary work that we've talked about, really start to look at what your internal resources are. What route are you planning on, finding an agency partner to do it? Are you looking to do it maybe internally or a freelancer? Then, I mean, it's like any kind of project, then go out and start to talk to people and get some bids. The more information you can give to an agency, the more likely you are to get back an estimate that's going to be accurate, and something that's you're going to be happy with the end product. So I think that's where I would start. I certainly we're biased, and you can work with Top Floor, but I mean, there's no shortage of web development agencies out there. And so start to kind of gather that information back from them and see, have those meetings, have those discussions, and see, you likely will come up with new things, new ideas, new things to add. Even though you've done all of your research, we always are going to have some say in what we think should be in that project, just because we do a lot of them. We're not just limited to the one company.
Yeah.
And I know we're a digital company, and I should be focused on those digital type channels. But I also think, just word of mouth, things like references. Like if you're in a group of, maybe it's an industry group, and some other people that have built websites recently, ask them, what did you like about the process? Who did you work with? What did you wish you did differently? Pick some other people's brains and just get their 2 cents on it as well, because that can help inform you, or at least get you down the right path of, okay, maybe I didn't think about that before. Now I need to consider that as well when I'm interviewing or talking to these different partners. So talk to people in a similar situation as yourself.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And this is a perfect segue too, since there will be a part 2 to this podcast episode that is more about what kinds of questions to ask a potential partner, kind of how you go through that selection process. So we will spend some time digging a little bit more into that. So yeah, you prepped that really well.
It's almost like we knew it was coming.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like you knew that's what I had planned. All right. Well, thank you both so much. I think that was really great information. I learned a lot, considering I would one day like a new website myself. So
I know a guy.
Got my wheels turning for sure. Yeah, that's all I have.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Justin. Thank you, Ed.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.